Bonjour tout le monde. Today we're going to talk about how and when to use the present tense in French. Throughout this video, we'll go over what is the present tense, what is conjugation, that's a verb or a term you're going to hear me throw around a lot. How do I conjugate verbs for the present tense in French, and what are some exceptions? So let's start with something that might be obvious but maybe not, and that is what is the present tense. Present tense includes things that you are doing right now. So actions that you are taking right now, things that you enjoy doing right now. But it can also sometimes refer to things in the future with a specific time. For example, if you say tomorrow at 7 p.m., I'm going to a movie, that's something that's happening in the future, but just like in English, we would use the present tense verb for that. I'm going to a movie. You could say I'm going to go to a movie, but you would probably just shorten to I'm going to a movie. As well as actions that started in the past but are still ongoing. So like I've worked here for 5 years. That is past tense in English, but in French you would use the present tense. You could say il y a 5 ans, je travaille ici. Ou je travaille ici depuis 5 ans would be better actually. Another big grammar topic, what is conjugation? Conjugation, in short, it's just changing the verb for who you're talking about. It's a lot easier to see with examples. Conjugation is the reason that I go is more correct than saying I goes. They're both the same verb. They both talk about going somewhere, but this one matches with the subject I a little bit better. Other examples, conjugation is also the reason we say she is rather than she are. Again, you'll notice with I goes and she are, if somebody said that to you, you would understand what they're saying. It just wouldn't technically be correct. So same thing in French. If you tell me one of these or the equivalent of it in French, I'll probably know what you're trying to say, but we want to aim for this correct version instead. The other reason we say they dance instead of they dances, the one tricky part is that in English, many conjugations are the same. Meaning that the same verb will look the same for many different subjects. So it is he goes, but it's I go, you go, we go, they go. So we have the word go repeated a lot of the time. That leads a lot of English speakers when we're learning French to ask, oh, what's the word for go? And it's more complicated in French. For most verbs in French, each subject will have a different conjugation. So this form for I would look different than the form for you, which would look different than the form for we, which would look different than the form for they. So what do we do with this? How do we conjugate verbs for the present tense in French? In short, there are really just two of those steps. First, we drop the last 2 letters of the verb. That is usually going to be IR, ER, or RE verbs. You'll hear us refer to these as IR verbs, ER verbs, or RE verbs. That's just referring to what are the last 2 letters of that verb. Then we add on a correct ending based on who we're talking about. I'll show you what those are in a minute. And then we're done. So, to form the present tense, most regular verbs will be in one of these 3 categories. So we have ER verbs, for example, aimer, which ends with ER, danser, also ends with ER. We have IR verbs like agir or choisir, and RE verbs like répondre or vendre. Right? So again, we drop the ending. That is the first thing that we do. Then we add back a new ending based on who we're talking about. So if we have a verb that ends in ER, and we are talking about je, we'll add I. For tu, it will be es. For il, elle, it will be I. Nous, ons. Vous, easy. Il, elle, ent. For IR verbs, the new endings for je are is. For tu, is. Il, elle, it. Nous, ils sont, issons. Vous, issez, isses. Il, elle, is, issent. And for RE verbs, for je, the ending is s. Same for tu. Il, il, elle, you just leave it. You don't add anything. It would just be the version without the RE at the end. Nous, ONS, so same as over here with the ER verbs. Vous, easy, again, same as over here with the ER verbs. Il, elle, ENT, again, same as over here with the ER verbs. So we see some similarities there. I often say that you don't necessarily need to write down everything, but this is something that you need to have a copy of because without knowing these different endings, you just won't be able to conjugate the verbs correctly. So pause here and write this down if you need to before we do a little bit of practice together. Okay, so let's do some examples together. So here's the step-by-step guide. Eventually, you will be able to do this kind of in your head without the step-by-step, just the same way that you can do some simple math without necessarily needing to write down everything. But while we are learning, we're going to go step by step, at least in our heads, if not also on paper. So if we want to say we dance, find the subject, so how we say we, and the infinitive. How do we say to dance? So we could say nous danser, then we drop the ER. That's our next step. So we're left with something that looks like this, nous danse. And then we add the ending for who we're talking about. So we would go back to our notes and look under an ER verb to see what ending we add for nous. And that would be ONS. So our final answer is nous dansons, for we dance. Take a look at another one. All right, for she talks, again, we figure out how do we say she. How do we say to talk? That will look like elle parlait. This literally means she to talk, so we've got some work to do. It's not done yet. We drop the ER. We're left with something that looks like this. And then we add the ending for who we're talking about. For an ER verb with elle, it'll just be E there at the end. So we'll say elle parle. Do another example. For you play. Now this one's going to be fun because you might remember that there are two ways to say you in French. So we'll start with tu jouais or vous jouez. We'll do both just in case, but you would know based on the situation which one to use. Drop the ER both times. We're left with tu joues or vous jouez. And then we add the ending for who we're talking about. So for tu, it would be ES. For vous, it would be EZ. This will be pronounced joue. Jouer. So all that are for regular verbs. There are many exceptions, as with everything in French grammar. We are not going to go over all of them today. That would be too long of a video. But we're going to go over, I believe, the 4 that are the most common. First one is être. You've already kind of encountered this one already. That is to be. So you know already that we say je suis for I am. For you are. Depending on who we're talking to, we could say tu es for when we're talking to one person who's somebody that we know well, or vous êtes for when we're talking to a group or to somebody that we don't know well. To say he, they, or she is, we would say il est, or elle est, or elle est. I've given you 2 ways to say we are, nous sommes, or on est. On translates to like one, but it is more common to see this being used as the way that we say we in French. And then for they are elle, il, ou elles sont. Another irregular one is avoir, which means to have. I have is j'ai, you have is tu as or vous avez. He, they, or she have, il, elle, a. We have, it could be either nous avons or on a. Or they have, il, elle, on. They have. Another very common one in the present tense, well, common in many tenses, but I will give the present tense to you, is aller, for to go. That's je vais, tu vas, or vous allez. Il, elle, va. Remember, when I have the slash here, you're just picking one of these. I'm just giving you multiple scenarios. Nous allons or on va. Elle, il, elles vont. And last one we have is faire, which means to do or to make. You'll see this used much more in French than you might imagine from English. It comes up in a lot of different expressions and as part of a lot of different actions. So that one will be je fais, tu fais, or vous faites. Il, elle fait. Nous faisons, or on fait. And il, elle font. And that's it for the present tense. Make sure that you have your endings written down as well as all the exceptions so that we can practice lots together.